got started a long time ago in open source, and it really is a 501c, a bona fide one, folks. MUFON is, and we're here to serve. And so, if you want to join, please go over there. You can I do it for $7.89 a month, and there's 5 and 9 and 10, and then you can join the PR and give money for $20. So we just help. That's what we're doing, is helping. Now, we can talk about Jan HARZAN, which you ladies may have missed, but Jan's got over 60 years in the UFO business and has helped way back when we had NICAP that I can remember, where there was Don Berliner there in D.C. and Jan Maccabee. Jan Maccabee's another Jan, her husband, Dr. Bruce Maccabee, and he's been on here and helped Janet and I start the ACO Alien Contact Organization, and Suzanne's come in to help with Ace Folklife tomorrow night. But Jan Aldrich, now, with all these groups, do you remember you came on the scene out of Washington, D.C., and I know that Dr. Bruce Maccabee was training at the CIA facility and helping people learn about UFOs. But your role, you were a child, and I'd like you to tell your story to Janet and Suzanne and all those listening, because you were just a kid at NICAP, weren't you, 15 or 16?
Well, yeah, I went to NICAP when I was, let's see, 1960. I met Richard Hall in NICAP, so that was
the big one. What does that stand for? National something?
National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. So
aerial phenomena.
Yeah, that's about 3 years after they were formed, and Richard Hall was assistant director then, and the very popular UFO author, Major Donald E. Keogh, was the director. And so during the summer, our family went on a tour of, well, my father was very interested in history, so we went to some of the Revolutionary War monuments, and we ended up in Washington, D.C. looking at some of those, and I asked him if I could go to NICAP, so he let me spend the afternoon there. So I guess I probably bugged Dick Hall all afternoon with talking to him, so he couldn't get any work done. But
so he got to know you.
Yeah,
pretty
he did.
Good.
So I would try to do things like, send in newspaper clippings and go into old newspapers and copy things out. And at that time, we were copying things out by hand and then typing them up. So I did that kind of stuff.
That's back when newspapers were really big, folks. Tell them how old
that was when all the UFO stuff was in the newspapers, and I investigated some cases around where I lived. None of them were very big, although I went on one with a police officer from Meriden, Connecticut, and so after he got off work, we would go around and do some investigations, and since now this is remember, UFOs are pretty at this time there's like a lull in activity, and they're pretty much a butt of everybody's joke, so it wasn't the greatest time to be in ufology. And one of the officers at the Meriden Police Department had a UFO sighting, and it's typical Hynek type thing. He stopped at a stoplight, and he sees in the distance what looks like biplanes. and they're coming towards him, but at a great distance. As they get closer, he sees they're not biplanes, they're triangles. And they're very low, and as he watches, they turn and zoom away. And so he went in and made a police report. and of course, all the other officers gave him grief and had a good time at his expense. But the fellow that I was with, Terry Murphy, he got a copy. So I sent that into NICAP, and that was like being a hero at the time because, like I say, it was a slow time for UFOs. So.
Well, I imagine Janet and Suzanne will have a lot of questions for you folks. This is a historical event today. It's July 17th, 2020, and we're making a oral story archive, and we've been very fortunate with Jan Aldrich to have a lot of the history of all our groups, since I've been alive, and we do cover some prior Majestic 12 and Stanton Friedman, and a lot of other people we can mention names that we've done in the past. But Jan Aldrich has shared a lot of his history, and we can have you go back and look at the archives. But Jan, what would you like to talk about? Because Jan had asked an important question to get the ball rolling on our narrative. We're the boomers, folks. We're the ones that were alive during a lot of these things and lived through the time. So we pretty much can tell you what we encountered and then what we actually can remember and what we stored in archives or read in newspapers or we're actually experiencing. But the most important thing is to get Jan here. And let's talk now, the MUFON coming, if you go to MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, you'll see where they have money they're taking in for the CUFOS and helping them as well, Jan. And you've been going over there. And at one time, why don't you share with Janet about the two groups or the three groups, and I know she'll like hearing the Robert Bigelow story, and I've got a little part of that myself on this with him and Stan. But where should we start with I'm always curious how Bigelow came in because people know when Captain McDonald was in last time, he was having to help with the money coming in for the three groups because you were part of that, weren't you?
Oh yeah, when they had it was MUFON, the Fund for UFO Research in Washington D.C. and of course CUFOS. They formed like an overall organization called the Coalition for UFO Research. So and the thing is, all these groups had treasuries, and so they still have. They're still in existence, even though some of them are not really active anymore. But they're still in existence, and they still have treasuries. So everybody's got some money.
Where they took in for
Bigelow
memberships?
He sponsored. That's what he did. He got the three groups together, and he said, look, I'm willing to fund some research if you can find some worthy projects.
Yeah, I believe he put in $35,000 of his own money. I believe that's, if my memory serves me correctly, I was in and all that during that time, but I'm believing it was $35,000 before he pulled out. But it had to do with if he was putting the money in, he wanted to control a part of it.
Well,
now,
at first
that's
he
just
said
hearsay.
at first he didn't want. He said, "Listen, it's up to you guys what you want to do." But then he did, and he funded other projects. They had investigators that would go around and investigate current sightings. So he funded that, and he funded other things besides that. So at first, like I said, or like you said, he let the groups pick what their projects were. Now, I have to say 35,000 is, no, that's too low. He
so
spent
you think
a lot
he put
more
in
than
more,
that.
or maybe he promised more?
No, he put in more.
Okay, so how do we have access? Is that public knowledge? Because this has been part of the controversy among all our groups that we've been a part of, our investigators.
Because I got more. I got around 30,000.
Oh my goodness! Oh, okay.
And Dick Hall got 10,000 to finish off the UFO evidence number 2, and there were other.
Goodness.
So there were other things. So already and besides that, Bigelow contributed to the treasuries because he knew that having to do this research coalition thing, and he is pretty good about this actually. He knows, hey, I can't give you, if I give you money for grants, but then you have to administer them, that costs you money. So he gave the groups money to help administer the grants. So already we're way ahead of 35,000.
Wow! So that you got almost 35,000 yourself then, just by it yourself alone.
Right.
So,
and my thing was I was going to travel. Today we don't need to do what I was doing, but then we didn't have computers with everything, computerized. So what I did is I traveled through 46 states and 5 Canadian provinces and Washington, D.C. So for 2.5 years I was on the road almost constantly, going from one place to another. So like I started off in West Virginia, went to Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, Illinois, and I went out to the far west, so Washington, Idaho, Oregon, across Canada, British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan. So, and what I would do is stop off at state libraries or legislative libraries or historical societies and check newspapers. Now, my project was to find stuff for 1947 and redo the find more information about the wave of 1947, which was really big, and people think that it's all about UFOs at a distance, but they're not. There's just like everything that you have today: landings, electromagnetic material, people being injured or physiological effects, being blinded by UFOs, or being one guy who was having has a heart problem. He was UFO flew right close to his home, and he had problems. His wife could attest to that because she was a nurse. And most of the things you find today, there were landings and all these other things you find today. You find in 1947.
Now, Barry Greenwood, where does he come into play? Does he do 47 forward or CUFOS only, or did he get assigned as one of the investigators? And do you know who was lead investigator under Robert Bigelow? I haven't done a complete research project or a complete investigation or followed the money either. So you probably have more data on all the various groups.
The three groups supplied their investigators, but Walter Webb was the investigator, and him. That's probably what started the whole thing about the coalition and Bigelow splitting, because Webb